Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. This is the opening of our Reimagine Week at St. Augustine's University. We are very excited about our future and this week full of celebrations, accolades, and stunning examples of SAU excellence in our students and our scholarship, excellence in our faculty, excellence in our leadership. Please sit back and enjoy this lecture in this sacred space, built by our ancestors for us to experience all that they left for us today. Let's open our minds and to all the greatness and all the possibilities of St. Augustine's University as we celebrate over 150 years of service to our students and to the community. Thank you very much for coming. Now we will have a word of welcome from Reverend Hershey Millette Stevens, the Dean of Chapel and Spiritual Life.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Carter. I want to welcome you and thank the Office of Advancement for partnering with us to bring Reverend Paul Smith for the inaugural Joseph N. Greene Lectures. This house of worship was built in 1895 under the direction of Reverend Henry Delaney, and out of a quarry, early students, newly emancipated people, young and old, built this place, not only for worship, but as a bridge from the academy that was built to house. You are part of the legacy that this building was meant to house. I just want everyone to take a second before we get started and just look around the room. Look at the stones that were quarried from this land, and look at the way that in different spaces the masonry has been put together in different ways. This place is not only a house of worship and a house of prayer, but it is a laboratory for learning. People learn to do stone masonry in this place, and the legacy of learning continues this day. And we're so grateful to have Father Greene, who will now bring our invocation and set the tone for the learning that will happen in this space. Well, come on. We'll wait.
Thank you for waiting. Got something to step upon and get me all the way back into this immortal pulpit. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to breathe in or breathe out. And get ready for an awesome experience from one of God's great speakers, Dr. Paul Smith. We are blessed to be here. I'm blessed to be on St. Paul's. I know my friend would love me for saying that. We lost St. Paul's, but at St. Augustine's College, University's campus. I had Benjamin Mays came here. Mordecai Johnson came here. And we students bathed in what those words were. And we learned. They taught. And that goes on. And you hear a part of that. It's a joy, Reverend Hershey, to get knowledge and also to know that it must be grounded in love, the love of Jesus. It was founded for that purpose. with that in mind. Thank you for being here, and I was glad that I had enough support to sponsor this speakership. And it feels funny to hear those words, the Joseph N. Greene Jr. Lecture Series. That sounds so strange to me, but I hope it has the value that I thought it would, and I know that we're off to a good start. Thank you, and God bless.
Father Greene, I believe it was St. Ambrose who said, "He who sings prays twice." Amen. Thank you, choir. Let's just give the choir another big hand, because they are students, and they came in the midst of exam week, and we are thankful and grateful for the gift that you bring into this space. We now will have the introduction of Father Greene by Father Jamon Taylor. It is always such a gift when you get to literally stand between the people whose shoulders you stand on. I came out of St. Ambrose Episcopal Church, where Father Taylor is the 11th rector of St. Ambrose Episcopal Church. And the two of us stand in the shadow of Father Greene, who also served as rector of St. Ambrose Episcopal Church. So would you now welcome Father Jamon Taylor for the introduction of Father Greene.
Thank you so much, Reverend Hershey. What can we say about Father Greene? His bio is extraordinarily long. We could call him the Reverend, Dr., and Honorable Joseph N. Greene. We could talk about his growing up in Jenkinsville, South Carolina, where he attended St. Barnabas Episcopal Church, being mentored by the black clergy there. We could say that he grew up on a farm, one of, I think, either 10 or 11. We could talk about his going to the Navy at age 16, being a World War II veteran. We could talk about his being a city council member in Norfolk for over 20 years and having a building named after him at the local community college. You can read about that online, but I'm just going to briefly talk about touchstones, like these stones quarried, and how Father Greene has impacted me. The first point of impact is this chapel. He was chaplain when my father, Robert Taylor, was a student here from 1955 to 1959. And it was Father Greene who ushered my father into confirmation in the Episcopal Church. Father Greene and I come from the church standpoint from the same part of the world of Upper South Carolina, which is where Jenkinsville is. And so when I was Father Greene, who would make visits there, and he even knew some of the people when I was growing up. So when I first met Father Greene physically in 2008, it was like I'd known him my whole life, because my father always talked about him. He is a great man, certainly a pillar of not only this community, but really the United States, and certainly the Episcopal Church. I'm honored to know him, and what a blessing to have this lecture series in his name.
Father Greene, you are next on the program, but before we give you an opportunity to say something else, I just would appreciate it if you stood up so that we might honor you in this moment for the gift that you have been to St. Augustine's and the gift that you have given us in bringing this lecture series to our university. Congregation, could we please salute Father Greene? Father Greene, you let us honor you. Who's the chaplain here? Do you want to, would you like to say anything else?
Hello, everyone. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." That's the New King James Version. In the New Heart English Bible version, it says, "Faith is being confident of what we hope for, convinced about things we do not see." Noah was convinced when God asked him to build the ark. He had faith. Abraham was convinced, ready to sacrifice his own son at God's command. Abraham had faith. Moses was convinced and led his people out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. The Red Sea could not stop Moses and his followers as God parted the waters, leading them to safety. Moses had faith. Faith means having an active trust in God. It directs one to action. Again, he's a civil rights activist, a man who fights to rid the world of injustice. Who is he? A man who has shaped a man who has shared his pulpit with former United States Ambassador Andrew Young and with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Are you still asking? Well, listen to this. He is a minority and diversity consultant for Macy's Federated Stores, a board member of several organizations, a racial sensitivity trainer for the New York Police Department, a seminary teacher guiding those called to preach, a former vice president of Morehouse College, and a former vice chancellor by his maternal grandmother who taught him about faith and how to love people and how to help people. His grandmother was like the neighborhood therapist. She just listened to folks in a way that made them forget about their worries for a while. His entire family, but especially his grandmother, left him a wonderful legacy. That legacy was to have faith in God and to turn that faith into action by helping others. Who is he? He's a man who followed his father's blueprint as a community organizer. In the barbershops, in the pool halls, in the doctor's offices, this man's father met with other men to make changes in the community. Who is he? A Howard Thurman-inspired, poem-reciting, scripture-reading man of faith. Who is he? He is the Reverend Dr. Paul Smith, and he comes before us today to challenge us to do three things: to listen, to learn, and to lead. He will come at this time.
I'm not sure I can do this after that introduction. And we had lunch, and I just don't. This is amazing. But I'm delighted to be here. So let's get to work. So I want you to use your minds as blackboards, okay? I'm going to give you some quotes and we're going to talk about it. So the first one is, imagine yourself out on the deep waters. Just imagine that you're on the deep waters. And this is one of Dr. King's favorite poems. And the poem goes like this. I'm tired of sailing my little boat far inside the harbor bar. I'd like to go out where the big ships float, out on the deep where the great ones are. And should my frail craft prove too slight for storms that sweep those billows o'er, I'd rather go down in the stirring fight than be drowsed to death by the sheltered shores. With me? So, Dr. Mays, from Morehouse, I used to spend a lot of time with Dr. Mays when I was vice president. I would go over to his house once a month. I inherited his furniture, but he just enjoyed my being there. But anyone who was a student at Morehouse will remember how Dr. Mays took that poem I just gave you and he put it in this context. So he says, now listen to this. Mays says he would rather go to hell by choice than drift into heaven with the crowds. What did I just say? Tell me what I just said. What comes up for you when Mays says he would rather go to hell by choice than to drift into heaven with the crowds? Yes, he doesn't want to fit. I want to, how do I put it? I want to be in the thick of things. I just don't want to sit on the sheltered shore. And when you decide to move away from the sheltered shores, whatever that is for you. That's when you start to grow. That's when you start to grow. So that poem was so important to Dr. King, and so he's always admonishing us to move away from the sheltered shore. So if you're a senior, or if you just come like my granddaughter is finishing her second year of college, she's beginning to move away from the sheltered shores of her family. You who are in school here, you're beginning to move away from the sheltered shores so you can begin to do the things that you feel God is calling you to do. So there's another poem, and it also says a lot about what we should be doing in these times. I need to tell you that my mind is in a different phase this morning because I read about the shooting of a kid in Grand Rapids. I don't usually watch the news, but I happened to see that, so it took me off course for just a minute. But this again is one of Dr. King's favorite poems. It's really not a poem, it's a challenge. So here it is. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expedience asks the question, is it politic? You know, we always try to do things for expedience. Expedience asks the question, is it politic? Vanity, oh my gosh, vanity. There's a time when you have to move away from what is popular, what is safe, what is politic, and ask the question, is it right? You want a good example of that? You know, one of the things at my age, I'm unfiltered, all right? So you just I don't have any boards to report to. I want to report now to Dr. McPhail and Dr. Carter and my wife. So part of the difficulty of the Congress is that very few of them, when they were voting on the confirmation of who just got confirmed for the Supreme Court? Kananji. So the conscience question doesn't come up with a lot of white males. You already know that. There's just no conscience. And so I don't know what's up with him. I mean that. I mean, what is up with him? How could he, as an African American, not vote out of his conscience? Out of his conscience, because it's right. This for a minute. You're a deep sea diver. And so you begin the dive, and you start going down, 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 and all of a sudden, there's this beautiful mosaic that Thurman refers to as the belt of the fishes. This audience here is the belt of the fishes. We have different colors, different clothing, different ideas, different faces, different belt of the fishes, because that's what the universe looks like for the diver. So there you are, the level of the belt of the fishes, and you're really feeling good. Things are really very nice. You're not afraid, you're comfortable. then the diver decides to go just a bit deeper. And Thurman calls that the abyss of darkness. So the diver looks down and he sees nothing but darkness. And so there's a sudden spasm of panic and fear. Should I go deeper? Or should I remain comfortable at the level of the belt of the fishes? You know, I have 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren. And I thought I was pretty cool about diversity and inclusion. And when I was living in Atlanta, one day a convertible drove like 20 miles into my backyard. And out jumps this kid in the car, and he says, "Is Kathy home?" That's my oldest daughter. And he's white. Now I'm looking at this saying, whoa, wait a minute. You drive into my driveway at 30 miles an hour? You don't say hello, you just get out. I want to know where my firstborn is. So that was a challenge to me because I had to really look clearly at what I was doing, how I was being perceived, and so that tested me. And so here I am. I want to be safe with my 3 daughters, but I know I have to let them go. And so the abyss of darkness challenges you because you see the light that you just left. Think about it. You see the light that you just left, but there is nothing but darkness below. So here we are, we're in the abyss of darkness. And at this level, we begin to understand that the God of your life and the God of my life is challenging us to move our ship away from the shore and go deeper. Now, Frederick Douglass says, agitate. So when I saw that clip on the television this morning, I started contacting, I called it my posse, and saying, you know, we need to do some agitating. See, it's you know that commercial said it's quite simple? Well, it really is quite simple. So here you are, the diver, you're in between light and darkness. So the diver then decides, you are the diver. You want to go a bit deeper. And you have a choice. You're in between, so you got to decide, where is God calling you? And God is calling us to go to the abyss of darkness. And when you go to the abyss of darkness, you don't go by yourself. And so here you are, trying to decide what it is you're going to do. You want to move that ship that you've been in. And so you do make the choice, and you go to the abyss of darkness. And the third level is a play on words. In fact, it's one of Thurman's books called The Luminous Darkness. The Luminous Darkness. So the fear, remember the fear you had at the abyss of darkness? Well, if you go deeper, then you begin to see all sorts of things. The luminous darkness opens you up possibilities that God has for you. And so here you are now, the luminous darkness, and the only way you can see what you've suddenly discovered, that there is light. Light is at that level of the luminous darkness. And the thing is, divers, the only way you can see the light is by being still. You know what that is? You know what it means to be still? And know what? That I am God. But you can't, at the luminous level, darkness level, you have to be still, because if you ruffle the water, you can't see the light anymore. And so the diver is still, I remember, and it's also in my book, there are times when my grandmother would ask me to sit down, be quiet. When my grandmother said, be still, that was something very different. She meant no movement, just be still. And know that I am God. So that in the midst of all of this going on in your life, the diver begins to see that at the level of the luminous darkness, he begins to see with new lenses. He sees in a different way. He sees things that come to him because he is still. Now I want to close with is you're still divers, and you're and at this level, it's like Aretha Franklin used to say, when her soul was in the lost and found, who came along and claimed it? I loved Aretha. Aretha was a cool lady. I mean, she and Nancy Wilson and I used to hang out together. And so what's being said here is that at this level, you don't want just anyone to come along and claim you. You want somebody that can bring you and teach you and take you to another level. So when I find myself, I begin to understand that God is brooding over you and me. And when God broods over you, something happens. Morgan Freeman said, you can't just sit back and observe. You can't sit back and observe. You have to get involved. So again, at the level of the luminous darkness, I begin to see with eyes that I did not see before. And all the things that are going on, you find a way to handle them. You know, the late Toni Morrison said, how long are we supposed to take it? How long? As long as God gives you breath. That's how long it is. And so I'm overly excited when I see that in the midst of all the things that really, really challenge me, I begin to understand that my walk, your walk, is with God. So let me close with there are two quotes I want to close with. One I don't understand, but I love it. You know who E.E. Cummings is? You know that writer E.E. Cummings? Put out of Harvard, he had bad troubles, with his family. He could never get anything together. But that was a cool brother, you understand? He's white, but he's a brother. So I used to to wonder, what is he talking about? Because he was just so ethereal. But he says, when God decided to create the world, he took one big breath larger than a circus tent, and everything began. Hold it there. Man, then, on the other hand, into because. Do you understand that? I certainly don't. But my students loved it. That was my test with my students, see how well they are paying attention. So, as we close, I want you to know one thing that Howard Thurman says. And you know, Howard Thurman, you should read him, speaks with a code. His language is so cool. It's, I mean, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time trying to figure out what it is, like E.E. Cummings. He just makes it plain. So, whatever controls your thermostat will control your temperature. Now, you work with that. Whatever controls your thermostat will control your temperature. And so when I think of those times when I was in the movie, when I was in Selma, when I think of the times when I didn't know whether I was going to live or die, when I think of those times when I was on a plane in Selma where they had put sand in the gas tank of the plane, when I think of those moments when someone spat in my face and in 1 nanosecond I was prepared to die, and the other nanosecond I could see the birth of my... So, questions? Yeah. You have any questions you want to have, or any dialogue, challenge in anything that I've said, which is pretty cool. I don't have to be right, I just want to be heard. Got it? You don't have to be right. You want to be heard. Yes? I'm sorry, I didn't. Yes, often. You know, Andy Young and I are very good friends. I took care of his first wife when she was dying. So you know, someone in that cat, you get really tight. So we were talking. You know, Dr. McPhail and Dr. Carter joined me when you know, Andy just turned 90 a couple weeks ago. So we were looking at ourselves saying, how did we get into this? Why are we here in Selma? You know, why are we doing all the things that we are doing? You know what we determined? A lot of it we did because we were young. I was in my 20s. I'm now 86. So when I was in my 20s, I was doing I didn't even question it, because I was following, as many of us were, we were following Dr. King because we knew he was a man of God. And sometimes, because you remember, oh, you're too young to remember, but in those days, when you were marching, you were always, it was always possible that you're going to get harmed. And so you got to decide, should I go or should I stay? And so we went. I was in Selma when Viola Louisa was killed. And I had to decide, was that, you do know, Thurman's he wrote 22 books. But his most important book I encourage you to get is Jesus and the Disinherited. Dr. King created the beloved community based upon that book. Jesus and the Disinherited. That's number one. And the other thing is that what Thurman was talking about in the 40s and the 50s is now relevant today. Is because of what he was saying in the 1930s when he wrote Jesus and the Disinherited. And you know, when you feel that you don't have any place to go, when you feel trouble is always following you, well, Thurman comes along with that book, Jesus and the Disinherited. And it speaks across all levels. As I said, when you read Thurman, he like speaks in a coded language. My friend Parker Palmer called a couple months ago, and he said he wanted to meet somebody. I encourage you to Jesus and the Disinherited. Just get that book. Read it, digest it, use it. Anyone else? Yes, sir. That's a great question. That's a great question. I vacillate, honestly, sometimes. And I vacillate because, but anger will get you killed. That's just, you'll see it in my book. When a guy spat in my face in Selma, in a nanosecond, because remember, I'm in my 20s, I'm healthy, you know. In a nanosecond, I had to decide, was I going to strike back? And had I done that, I wouldn't be here today. Because that's what they wanted me to do. Don't get angry. Don't get angry. Don't be fearful. Lo, I am with you. Where? Even into the ends of the earth. And I believe that. That's the entirety of my life. And none of the, I call them distractions, will keep me from my joy. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee. My joy is intact. And that, well, I mean, the way they treated Katanji was just trying my spirits. But I said, if she can stay, if she can hold, I can hold. And we did. But be aware of the enemy, which is fear. And so you remember what Dr. King said, because Andy said that, you know, they sequestered his plane anytime he flew anywhere. The night before, they just sequestered the plane. And so Andy and they were saying to Dr. King, we have checked out security in Memphis. It's dangerous. Don't go. Don't go to Memphis. You know what will happen to you if you go to Memphis? And you know what Dr. King's response was? Don't think about what will happen to me if I don't go to Okay, thank you, sir. Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for listening. I mean, you just covered everything that I said. It's like I took my grandson to the Mint. He was 16 at the time, and it was a hot day in D.C. and he was, you know, like, Granddad, why are we going to see the Mint? And when we got home, his grandmother, my wife, said, how did it go? Lloyd Toad is always providing you clues. You gotta pay attention to the clues. The 5 years here in this pulpit, Father Greene, that's a clue. That's a clue. The fact that the choir sang a particular song, that's a clue, because that touched my soul. And imagine, just imagine, suppose Stevie Wonder showed up in the midst of what was going on in Ferguson. What do you think might happen? Anything is possible. But I think, and that's why we're beginning this academy at the cathedral in D.C., that if the significance of place, this place has significance because it has a history. This place is significant because babies were baptized here, people were funeralized here, people grew here, people cried here. Place, the significance of place. You have to remember that. My book talks about my place was on my grandmother's porch. I was 13 years old, and people came to Granny's porch because that was the place where you could center down at the end of the day. And so they come and say, Ms. Overby, here's what my day was like. And I was a little kid sitting there next to Granny, listening, wondering, why are these people coming up on Granny's porch at the end of a workday, wanting to talk? Place, significant. Don't ever forget that. Thank you.
Daughter, if we didn't close with some thank yous. So I want to thank, especially, first, of course, I want to thank our speaker, Dr. Paul Smith. Thank you so much. Thank you for introducing us collectively to the works of Thurman. I was actually just having a conversation with my husband about having the chapel scholars read Luminous Darkness. It's one of my favorites, and I actually literally fell in love reading Jesus and the Disinherited. That's a story for another day. So I want to thank you so much for your words. Of course, we want to thank Father Greene for making this day possible, making this learning possible. And I want to thank Father Taylor for being with us, and thank our ad hoc tech crew, my husband Rob and Alex. Yes, and I want to thank our actions to our community. And then I have one last big thank you, and I know she's going to be mad. But I want to thank Dr. Carolyn Carter. Please stand, Dr. Carter. Please come out, Dr. Carter. I thank Dr. Carolyn Carter and the team over in Advancements, Ms. Examinees, Ms. Sanders, the Marcom team. You know, wonderful things happen when we work together, and I think this team has just set a standard for what wonderful things look like and what can happen when teamwork and collaboration becomes a deep part of who we are at St. Augustine's. So thank you so much, Dr. Carter, for leading the charge on this. Oh, the food. There's food. There's food, which is always wonderful, because I think after we feed our spirit, we also need to feed our tummy. It just helps, get everything aligned. But there's also an opportunity for you to have more conversation with Father Greene and Father Smith in an informal setting. I just fathered you. I hope that's okay. I'm so Episcopal. With Father Greene and Dr. Reverend Smith in the Martin Luther King, what are we calling it now? MLK Center. Okay, sorry. You know, we're reimagining, things are coming back online. I'm getting there. I'm gonna be there with y'all. We're going to Martin Luther King Center to have conversation, have food and conversation with Father Greene and Reverend Smith, an opportunity to purchase books, get a book signed, and I think also just have a little space in this really busy week to touch base with one another. So I hope that you will avail yourself of that opportunity, and also I hope that this will not be the last time that you come for the Father. Holy and awesome God, in this week of reimagining, in this week of celebrating all that you have done in the lives of students and in the life of this institution, we come at this moment to say thank you. Thank you for the gifts and labors of Father Joseph Greene. Thank you for the word and challenge that Reverend Paul Smith has brought to us this day. We thank you for every person under the sound of my voice. And God, we especially thank you for students, for those who have been charged to learn, for those who seek not only knowledge, but love so that they may enact that knowledge. God, we know that without students, that your work for this world cannot be fulfilled. Without learning, without love, without the pursuit of excellence, we cannot seek to continue to build on what we have, that they may embolden and empower us to go out into the world to do the work that you have given us to do. Help us to be ever mindful of those who live without food, and help us to be mindful of those who have not conversation and friends. But we asking you now, God, to give us the strength to do something about that. That we come to this place not just for the pursuit of knowledge, but to become scholar activists who change this community and who will change the world. We ask all this in the name of the one who came to love us and liberate us. Amen.
Amen.
Look, I was about to say, Reverend Carter, do you have instructions for us? But Dr. Carter, do you have instructions? All right. Meet us at MLK.